Good day and welcome to join our free Vertex webinar, Sync Key Features and Efficient Usage. My name is Petri Mokkari. I'm a product owner in Vertex and I work as a host for this webinar today. We have project manager Philip Sigvardsson also with us today. Philip works in our Swedish office. He will demonstrate in practice how Vertex Sync brings order to chaos and how Vertex Sync works efficient, secure, and versatile way to manage large volume of files, collaborate on work, and ensure seamless access to files across the devices and locations. This is the second part of Vertex Sync webinar series. The first part, Getting Started with Vertex Sync, is available in YouTube. This session is perfect for anyone looking to streamline their work with Vertex Sync, including those who are just starting out. The demonstration Philip gives you will cover the following benefits. Find information instantly without your inbox or other file sharing services. Add, organize content without extra effort. Collaborate with confidence, reserve and release items, revise files, and swap in the newer versions without losing history. Protect and control your data. Lock critical objects, manage metadata. Nothing is overwritten or misplaced. We walk this webinar through in 60 minutes. Please feel free to type your questions in the question box during the webinar. We will address them after the demonstration in the question and answer session. Now we can move on to the demonstration. Please feel free to start.
I'll go ahead and share my screen here.
Yes, please.
There we go. My screen should now be shared and you should be seeing the landing page or home page for the sync environment or your sync organization. What we showed in the previous webinar was basically how to set it up, and this will showcase more on how to use it, how to utilize the most functions. In this case, I'm in a environment where we have uploaded some buildings already. So this is an example of how it could look. There's a few buildings. You can either sort here on the different types of buildings. You can set up the labels we talked about in the previous webinar. In this case, I can click on carports and then I can only see the carports. If I click on the garage, I can only see the garage. And of course, you can do this with everything. You can, of course, navigate to your buildings using these four different selections at the top here. You can click on recently worked on and you can see all the buildings you have recently worked on. You can go to recently visited and it will also show you what you have visited previously. And you can, of course, also mark or set your specific building as a favorite and will show up in here. So this building that I had here, for example, the demo house, I've selected to be a favorite because it's a lot easier to access. So if you know you're going to be working on a building for, let's say, a month or two forward, you can set it as a favorite so you can access it easily, and then you can unfavorite it in the future when you don't want to see it here. And if you go here, I'm now inside the building or the building itself. So this is a building straight from BD. All the files are generated in BD, which will also show up here. The same filter or labeling system in the building itself is similarly to what you saw previously when you were filtering on the buildings itself. Here you can click on the document. I can here filter, let's say I want to see only NC files, and I will also now only see my WOP files, my CDT files, and Handegger if I have some. I can filter on the production drawings. So here I have my production drawings. I can either download the production drawings through here. I can share the production drawings if I want to send it externally or to the production group. Or I can, of course, open the production drawings straight in the browser and view them here. So if you have, like, let's say a tablet in the production, they don't need a physical piece of paper to see the production drawings. Same thing with the proposal drawings, for example, here. I have a PDF book, which is essentially the proposal drawing for this building. And I can send this to the salesperson or the customer themselves if they want to view the document online, instead of sending mails back and forth. If I head on back to the building and remove the labels, I can now also show the building site details, which is the building data card from BD. So what you see in here is the information the designer enters in BD when creating the building, or you can of course do the other way around. You can enter the information here and it will show up in BD. So here I have the city, I have the address, the post number. I can also from here, of course, click on the pen top right, and I can change this. I can change the building name to some example name. And then when I click save, this will now update when you open the building in BD, it will also show there. So it's very easy for example, the salesperson to access and enter any missing information straight from here. Along with this, I can of course do building specific search. So here I will search inside the demo house in this project, or in this example. Here I can search for production. If I don't want to use the labels, I can of course just search for the files. And here it will search inside of this building for this string. I can also click on this and I can search for production. And then I will search for production in the entirety of Sync. So it will be the same thing as typing here. So if I search for production, it will be the same thing. The difference is that I search inside the building or in Sync environment entirely. So I was thinking in this case, I will now do a project folder, since we don't really work with folders or a directory themselves. We use labels. We can of course still create a project folder where we can sort of attach multiple buildings and multiple site plans and documents and stuff related to the whole project. Let's say there's multiple buildings in the same sort of project. You can attach everything to the same folder. I can click add new here. I click type. I'm going to create a new project. This project is going to be called some random project number. So in this case, it's 2001-53. I can already here click add label. So if I in the future want to filter on, let's say I have 100 projects, I want to quickly see the projects that were created in 2025 or were delivered in 2025, I can add in a 2025 label here. I click save, and a new project has now been created. I will right away favorite this because I know I will be working with it. But you can of course just now enter the project. And this is essentially just an empty folder in this case. Here I can, if I want to make this a little bit more clear, because right now there's no preview window or preview thumbnail. So I can change this folder image to look a bit more like the project itself. So I have an easier understanding of what the project is regarding. So if I go top right here to more and then change preview, I can now attach an image here, which I have. Let's just take the site plan, which is quite clear on Musan. Now, when I back out of this, I click on the project. I will now see my projects. So let's say I have 100 projects. It's a lot easier to see, okay, this one is related to this project with 6 buildings. So I can now enter this one. I can click the plus bottom right. And here I can import my files or attach files. So import files. I will import my construction document, my fire and safety, and my site plan in PDF. Click OK. I will click Save here. I can, of course, already in this situation add my labels for each individual document. But in this case, I will just leave it as it is. It will become a document. This is the name. You can, of course, change it. And then I can click Save here. When these are added, you can now, of course, if you didn't set the label before, you can change it after the fact also. You can select these two, and I can right-click. I can click Edit Label. And here I can add let's add the report in this case. You can, of course, as I showcased in the previous webinar, I showed how to create your own labels. This is, of course, some default ones, and you can create your own. So I added the report label, click Save. And then on this site plan, you will go into it, and then you can click, here, you click the pen. For individual objects, you can click the pen here, and then you will see labels over here. Now you can add the site plan label. Now we'll go back. And now we have our construction document, we have our fire and safety, and then we have the site plan. If you were to, let's say, add the wrong file, let's add some extra document here. You can, of course, simply just select the document and click Remove. And it will disappear. So now I have all the documents. I can either, same thing here, can select the document, click Download, or I can share it directly. Or I can also manage access if I have some guests in my sync organizations who don't have all viewing access from the beginning. So here I can just add my roles to who can see it. In this example, I also prepared some buildings in BD. So if we go back to favorites, I have two different buildings here with different colorways. So this one is dark gray and light gray. And then the other one is basically mirrored, so it's light gray and then dark gray. I can select these two buildings. I can select either one of them, and I can click Move. And I can click on my favorites here. I can now move this to this folder. So I can either move it completely, or I can just link it. If you link it, it will just show up under that project, but it won't like its actual destination or directory won't be under that project. It will just show up. But in this case, I will move it because these are related to just that building or just that project. So I click Move. I go into this project now. So this is a project folder. Here I have some general documents related to the entire project. And then here I have two buildings inside that. So if we open the site plan, you will see that one of these is one of these, each one of those houses here. If I have two of them, I maybe want a third one, maybe I have a different colorway. I can, of course, just duplicate my building here. I can call this one 2001-56-3001, and then this will be maybe a sand color and then light gray color. So I can remove that one and then OK. And now I have my building here. And this one will also be moved automatically to where you duplicated it from. So I can also favorite that one. So now I have three different ones. This one I can go into BD, I can change the coloring of it, but it will be three separate buildings here, and they will have three separate documents. So here I will have my NC files, all the BTL files. I will have all my details necessary. And then I will have my structural side also. And of course my reports, if I have some Excel reports. There's also something that was in the demo files. If I were to go into this, let's say this document here gets an update, the fire safety document. I don't want to upload a new document. I want to change the existing one to feature the new document, but still keep the history of there being a previous version. So if there's something wrong, if something delivered wrong, you can go back in the revision history to see that, okay, this was actually something else previously. So in this case, I can click on I went into the fire and safety document. I can click on revisions and events. I can click on revisions, and then I can revise this revision. Here I can update the document. You don't have to type something here, but it makes it a lot easier in the future to see when or related to something why it was updated. Now you see there's revision 2. I can now click on the pen and replace my file here. So this is 2506.11, and this can easily be changed to 2506.12. And then click add, and then save. So now you can go back to the project. You will see 2 different revisions here. You will see revision 2 and revision 1. And you will see that the file is different. So this one is file 12. The name, of course, was the previous date, but the name can be just fire and safety document because the name isn't related to the date. So here you can see that, okay, there was 2 different revisions of this. You can go back to this one and still view this PDF file and see what the difference was. But let's say the site plan is it's done and it's considered it won't ever change basically. So you can lock this document to never be changed. You can add what we call overwrite and revision locks. So if you go into revisions, you can here add a lock for this being able to overwrite this revision. So no one can basically just overwrite the existing revision. So I click on this pen here. You will now see a grayed out pen up here, and it will say locked by, and then whoever locked it. And then you can also add a revision lock. So no one can revise this document either. It will now be grayed out here. So now this document can never change. This was the document that was signed, and this one is the one that's active. If let's say I want to go into the sand and light colorway building and edit it in BD, I can either reserve it in BD or I can also reserve it here by clicking this three dots and then reserve. And then this will be reserved by my name. It will now say that it's reserved by me. So let's say I also have a few revisions of, let's say I had 2 different revisions of the building. In this case, I don't have 2 revisions. I only have 1 revision, but let's say I have 2 revisions of some object or some, let's say I go into fire and safety. I created a second revision here, but this one actually turned out to be wrong. It's still this one that should be active, or maybe the customer changed his mind or someone changed their mind. So you need to go back to revision 1. You can just remove revision 2 by clicking remove here. It will remove it in order. So if you have 5 revisions and you try to remove the whole object, it will remove them first the 5th revision, and then 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and then the 1st. So you click remove. And now you will be back to revision 1, which I will say here. You can also, in these, in the buildings themselves, you can of course also click on the plus bottom right, click add new, and then you can either add your documents here, which is related to this specific building. So the objects or the documents I had in this building will only affect this building. It will not show up in the general project, which is quite nice because some object like the what's it called, the sales report or the opening schedules for ordering new windows only affects this building. So you don't want it to show up in the whole project. So that way you can sort of organize that all the orders related or sales related to this building will only show up in that building, and you can sort of organize it that way. So you can sort of consider each building as a folder, more or less, is the idea I'm trying to get at. And then here you can go back to the entire building, or you can go back basically to the start here. And as default, you will have the building to be as default. So you can change the default active filter by clicking your user profile here. You click on preferences, and then you can change from building to project if you work more with projects than buildings. If you only work with like single family homes and you don't need a larger project plan, you can of course do everything I've just demonstrated in the building folder itself. The project can be used for stuff related to larger things than just some single family home. But if I now uncheck the building here, I can go in the project, and I will now see all my projects, including this one. But my recommendation is the fact that you can favorite your project folder, so it's easier to find here. But it's also visible here. If I click on 2025, it will only show the ones with the label 2025. So same thing here. If I duplicate this, it will duplicate it in BD, so the designer can start working at it right away. You can sort of, if you have a template building in Sync, like a BD template building, you can prepare everything from the Sync UI for the designer to then start working in BD. So when they start working or designing in BD, they can start it up and they will see all the 6 different buildings they need to start designing. And any document you attach in here will also show up in BD. So you can, as mentioned, just prepare everything beforehand, and when you start working in BD, it will sort of transition into a seamless collaboration, I guess, between either the salesperson, this project manager, and the designer. And that is sort of everything also I've showed in this demo will also be available here under your user profile, under help. And if you then click sync documentation, it will bring you back to our user manual basically. It will show you first getting started, which is just initializing Vertex Sync, or what we covered in the first webinar. And then working in Sync is basically what I showed now, where it explains in further detail the reservation and the object locks. So you can lock either the overwrite or the revision. If you lock the overwrite, it will only lock the ability to overwrite that existing revision. If you lock the revision, it will lock the fact that you can't create new revisions. And if you lock both of them, of course, you can't do anything with the document. It will be sort of in a locked state. And when I here reserved my building, I can now also either in BD or in Sync UI release my building. And it will now be available to everyone. So if I go back here, I can also, of course, see the further description of what copying and moving and linking does. Linking, as I mentioned, creates just the link between the objects. It doesn't move the object. It will just show that this relates to this building, basically, or this object. So a building is an object, but the project is basically also an object. But it's a lot easier if you think of the project as being a folder and then the building being the object. So the project is the folder, and then everything under it is one object containing then different objects. You can, of course, go back here. If I have some document inside one of these buildings, I can then link this document to the header project, this project. And then if I go into here, it will now show up here as well. So you can have documents inside one building which sort of affects the other buildings that you want to mention. Okay, this one has to be shown in the bigger like project view. So that's linking it. So if I now click this, it will say that it relates to this one. So then I can go into here and find it also. So that's sort of the descriptive ways of working with sync, I guess. And if you go into favorites again, if I go into the first one, you can of course also view this model in 3D from BD. So when you upload the building from BD to Sync, it will generate a 3D model of the building. And if I just this building was quite it was a fully framed building, so it's both architectural and structural side. So it is a quite heavy building. But when it has generated the architectural side, we can either view it directly in Sync or we can send it to, let's say, the customer or whoever. So here we can see the different colorways. This is the architectural side. And then I can also, in the same sort of view, switch to I can also, of course, go here and then make a cross section either horizontally or vertically here if I want to sort of view the building from different views. And I can now switch to the framing model. And this will instead show the framing side of the building, which is quite useful when you're trying to either show the production crew or the building site crew who want to know how specific detailing is done or how a cornice solution looks in the actual model. They don't want to depend on 2D drawings. So on the framing side, which is of course a larger model, especially this one being 6 apartments, can be opened, and you can also select the different parts and sheets, etc. And then it will show you the framing side of it. So in this case, the framing side on the model is not colored, but it's of course colored when you order it. So here I can zoom in, I can select one piece of siding board, and then I get the necessary information regarding the siding board. And this, I will just do a quick cross section here. You can here also just select the sheet and then information, and you get the specific sheet information, which is all dependent on the specific building object you're in. So if I do a close model here, if I just close this, which is the similar, and we're talking about sharing and giving access to these different objects previously. If you're going to model here, you can choose to share either the architectural model or the framing model. Let's say I want to share the architectural model with the customer to approve if everything looks as it should. You can either share here, enable share, send the customer this link or this QR code, or just press on this button here. It will send an email to them, basically, giving them the link to access this 3D model to do what I just did. On the framing side, it's basically the same thing, and you just probably share this with the building site crew instead. So you click on the model, click share, and then enable share. It is important to distinguish that when sharing the entire parent object, so when you share this here, it will not share the 3D model. You have to go in here and then share the model specifically here, because you, of course, sometimes you don't want the customer to see all the documents inside the project because maybe it's not related to the customer. Maybe it's internal notes, or maybe it's different revisions, or whatever it is. So you go into model and then you share the architectural model, and then they will be able to view it 3D model on their browser or on their telephone. So this is sort of on how it all works and how to navigate around it. It's a lot easier to navigate, at least, and organize if you start doing the project concept. So you exit the building view, and then you click on the plus on bottom right, and then you create the new project object. So this is if you want to keep the documents, let's say the building site, either if it's a single family home or not, if you want to keep the building site details or site plans, for example, you can keep those separate from the building object if you don't want to keep them in the building object or in the building itself. Basically, if you want to keep one folder and then your documents and then your building, You can, of course, also put all of these inside this building itself. But then you would have to either put all these documents in each building, or you would have to link all these documents to each building. That way it's easier to set it up as a project, and then you will be able to view it all in one screen, sort of, or one view here. But I highly recommend both the recording of this webinar to sort of go over this. Was done quite quickly as there's a lot to cover. But the recommendation is going through the user manual through help here, and then sync documentation. And if there are any questions or any questions really, feel free to ask. So I think you are muted. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I share my screen. Do we have any questions? Yes, we have a couple of questions. You mentioned these new labels. You can add new labels. They were default labels. Who can add new labels to the system?
Yeah, so it's only the person who is in the admin role on Sync who can add the labels, but they can of course set up any type of label. It doesn't have to be specific to that building.
Okay, thank you. And then there is a about those locks. Who can unlock those documents?
Yeah, so when a document is locked, the only person who can, let's say, or let's start with if a object is reserved, the only person who can release it is the person who reserved it, or an admin user who is in what we call super user mode. So they can sort of ignore any access restrictions. But the person who locked it is the one who has to unlock it, which is a safety thing, basically.
Okay. And then the last question is what is the one practical use for link? I can answer this. For example, in building projects, there are lots of common documentation which is same to all projects. Something like guides how to customers should be prepared the site and so on and so forth, for example, or something instruction manuals and such like those documentations. Those can be linked as a link can be the same document can be linked multiple projects, and
Yes.
if it's removed from from under some project, it stays on the other project when it's linked. So you can reuse the same documentation, same instructions over and over again without needing to copy that same, for example, PDF file to every project. You can just link that documentation to all projects. That's the one practical use for example, for link. And then there seems not to be any questions at the moment, so maybe we can then say that next webinar in this Sync series is kept on June 24th, and the title is How to Start Using Vertex PD Efficiently with Sync. So in next webinar, we are concentrating our Vertex PD CAD side and how the Vertex PD works with Vertex Sync. So thank you all joining us today and have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you as well.